All right. Well, welcome to another M&M podcast with your hosts, Michelle and
Martin.
today we're gonna do a two-parter since we unfortunately had to skip a little bit of time, and actually I'm pretty sure I won't even be able to release this until later this week. So we're going to try to get some more content out and hopefully get and delay release it. It's the new trick of the new age.
Suspense.
Yeah. Or how does it anticipation is how Dr. Frankenfurter said in whatever musical that was, Rocky Horror Picture Show. Anticipation, except you hold that, right? Patient. Anyway, so our focus today, just to kind of hop around some of the ideas that we had, is mainly focused on education, but we're going to go through a little bit of technology and heritage as well to relate to that. And so really the big thing that we started off today with is the idea that education, we sometimes, what is it? We call it informal and formal sometimes.
Yeah, most of the time when people talk about education, normal education in itself is usually there's a formal in bracket, silent formal, but in real sense education takes place in two forms.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinarily it will be described as either formal where you go to school and informal where people just learn under a tree, as we say at home. So there's people who have formal education under a tree.
Yeah.
Incidentally.
Yeah. So something like if I'm homeschooled, that is an informal type of education. Would that or right? So here's where we fall into the problem.
Yeah.
Is that formal education and informal education, the way that we just say it offhand, may be a problem in itself, because what is formal education? What are we defining it as?
Where I come from, formal education might be described as Western education, and there's a clear difference between that and traditional or informal education. Informal education, first of all, in Kenya, most schools have school uniform. So kids wear uniform, they go to class in the morning, they're released at midday or in the evening, and they get to learn. And you can do that in primary school, in secondary school. We don't wear uniform in university or college, but that still falls into formal education. Then informal education would be considered to be what you learn mostly from home or from your family members, from your extended family. And it's usually associated with skills, with hard skills, like taking care of a kid, taking care of the farm, being a blacksmith, for example,
or being basically the labor jobs almost.
Exactly.
Right, and that's where we came across a problem, right? Because you can have formal education through apprenticeships. You can basically sign up, and some of the greatest people I know, I mean, work in that type of industry. They work as custodians of schools. They did a fair amount of training and a fair amount of work in how to do their job, and it's by no means informal, right?
True. And speaking of which, for a large part of my childhood, I was told that education is the key to success. So to say, you have to work hard in school, work hard now and rest later, rather than rest now and work hard later. But it's quite confusing because I look at some of call them my heroes, or people who inspire me, mostly on the internet, people who have developed proper products or complete TV shows where they have a huge audience, an audience of over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million people watching them weekly. And most of the stuff they have is self-taught. People like, say, Casey Neistat. He dropped out of high school, but his ambition was to be a movie maker, and that's what he became. If you look outside to the tech world, someone like Steve Jobs or
Bill
Gates,
yeah.
They dropped out of education. They dropped out of formal education at some point, and Richard Branson also, for instance, he dropped out, but he still managed to make it. So I think there's a bit of a challenge with the informal tag, the formal informal tag.
Yeah.
So you're thinking if there's other ways of trying to differentiate forms of education. How do people learn?
Yeah.
You
And so I think the biggest thing that we found is that, at least in nowadays, I'm not sure if it applies in the past, but it really comes down to how you take in the amounts, the copious amounts of data that we have, the raw information that we have nowadays in archives, in different sites and different libraries and movies. It's huge. It's a huge amount. We get bombarded with all sorts of information every day. And so then it becomes the question of how do you structure that information, right? It's the difference between your raw data that you can use to do whatever you feel the need to do, and then the structured stuff, which still has raw data in it, but it's made in a way that we can actually digest it.
True. And I think within that lies also another challenge in trying to structure education. Every now and then when I'm scrolling through my timeline on social media, I'll find someone complaining that for the last 4 or 5 years since he left school, he hasn't used the Pythagorean theorem to do anything. Or for us, you are taught the different parts of a grasshopper. And someone was commenting that maybe that's why our economy is so much far behind that of China and Japan. Because from childhood, it's assumed, back at home, people assume that they get to learn some really technical skills at an early age that they can use. Yet for us, it's something that was structured, which is good. It's prepared for the students. But the problem is now, sometimes it becomes static and you just learn it because it's in the system, but it's not necessarily something you'll need or use.
It's a structure that's dated back to the 1930s or 40s.
True.
I mean, in some cases. I mean, nowadays, hopefully, there's a little bit more up-to-date information and ideas on curriculum. But it's true. I mean, there's a lot of new curriculums that are popping up, trying to invent this new way of thinking. When in reality, it's not. We don't necessarily need a new way to think. It's a new way to digest information.
But how do you incorporate that? How do you incorporate such progressive thinking into the idea of heritage and passing on information about heritage?
Yeah. I mean, in at least for me, I had a recent conversation with an old professor of mine back at UMass, Eric Paler, and he works he works a little bit on Pompeii, and one of the things that we discussed basically, and we had a chat recently about how you can use different types of technology to basically convey that raw information or that raw data. I mean, one of the projects that we ended up doing in class is he basically brought back a 3D printed model of a column in Pompeii, in a section of the city, of the old city called I believe the Quadriporticus. And basically, with the 3D model, what you could do is you could take this physical thing, at least downscaled so you can hold it, and you can take a look at it in the classroom. And we were kilometers and kilometers away from Pompeii, right? We're in the United States. We're in Massachusetts. And the small town of Amherst, and we're looking at a 3D model of something that was made very long time ago and buried under ashes and rocks, and the amount of information that you can just that's right there, that's translated raw data, right? You have the actual site, you have the column. It has a story to tell, right? There's certain parts of the column that may have been deshaped or deformed. Different parts were used. Maybe there was some patches, and we're able to basically translate that with pictures. Take pictures of all around the column, and then basically create in a 3D digital environment, and then print it out because you can print 3D now, which is awesome.
It's amazing.
and then you can bring it into the classroom or wherever you can go, and you can say, hey, look, here's a column. What can you what story does this tell?
Yeah, but I think a challenge that might come up with that would be someone might say, no, that's not the actual column. I went to this other website which deals with Pompeii, and they also have this alternative version of it, and this is the right one, and perhaps whoever gave you that is trying to push their agenda.
Oh yeah.
And that's a challenge that I think comes with technology and education again, and it causes a clash between what we consider to be formal and informal.
Right.
Because the informal is really rich, and it's just a mine, or a gold mine
of just raw information, right?
Yeah, there's valuable stuff, but you'll have to sift through a lot of stuff that you may or may not consider to be valuable.
Right.
Still on the subject of using technology to convey information about heritage. There's something I was working on earlier in the year, and I'm about to come up with part 2. It's called what's the word? Lost it. Controversial heritage.
Okay.
Controversial heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What example would you give for
controversial heritage? I'd give the example of Columbus Day.
Yeah. Okay.
From my perspective, and it may come off the wrong way, but white Americans might be celebrating it as a triumph of Columbus, this guy who managed to sail in that ancient technology, in that rickety old ship, and all the way from Spain to the Americas, and discover the New World. But on the other hand, there's these Indians. He actually called them Indians, and they're Native Americans.
Yes, they are Native Americans.
From their perspective, this is someone who was lost, and he came and discovered this place and went back home, and more people came and they dispossessed us of our land. Where technology comes in is that such conversations get a wider audience right now as opposed to before, because I wouldn't say that the controversy has just existed as long as the internet existed.
Yeah.
It obviously existed from way back, but right now that people can discuss it, people start questioning their textbooks.
Yeah.
People get to sometimes have intelligent conversations about it. Sometimes people go all ham on the comment section style,
Yeah. But yeah, no, the Columbus Day is a perfect example of that, because I'm not sure if it's Thanksgiving Day or if it's Columbus Day or both, but I know for a fact that one of those days there's a group of I forget which tribe they're from. I forget where exactly.
Actually, both of them are controversial.
Yeah, both of them are controversial, but specifically on one of those days, I know that one of the TA, the teacher assistants that we had for North American, I forget what it was, but it was a class about Native Americans, and basically the TA herself is she was part of one of the tribes, and basically said that sometimes like every time that specific holiday rolls around, once again, forget if it's Thanksgiving or Columbus Day, they actually go to Plymouth. No, it's Thanksgiving Day. They go to Plymouth Rock, which is in the United States. It's in Massachusetts, and it's supposedly the place where the Pilgrims, the original Pilgrims, landed. And exactly. So I'm pretty sure it was Thanksgiving. And so what they would do is they would actually Plymouth Rock is actually not that big, and so what they did is they take sand and they bury it as a symbolic representation of themselves being buried, literally, by just the oppressive colonists, and that's once again, it's a conversation that is happened in the textbook, but is not necessarily something that we would really have access to beyond the classroom. It's something now that we can talk to. We in Massachusetts can talk to somebody down south in Texas about what happened there and why that's important, or what can be understood from this information.
Yeah. And if I could ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the most, in which way has technology impacted you most with respect to learning about heritage, your heritage, say, as a French person, as an American, or as whoever you choose to be?
yeah, sure. Yeah. As a global citizen, right?
Yeah, as a global citizen.
And I mean, for me, technology in terms of what it's allowed me to do, it's allowed me to explore different avenues of thought. How do I think differently about certain things? And in many respects, what it allows me to do is it allows me to critically think about my sources. It's like, let's say if I have a textbook that says, yes, there was this. Here's a great example. I was obsessed with myths and stories and legends from the Greek and Roman mythology. And what I would do is I would gather books about that, and then I started gathering books about Egypt mythology, and then Celtic mythology and Norse mythology. And basically what technology allows me to do now is it allows me, like modern day, like information tech. So my computer or I don't know. Basically, it allows me more access to different sources that I may not necessarily have access to. But here's what's interesting, though. I'm almost. It's almost. I mean, we know this because we live in Germany, right? The YouTube for the musicians is blocked by Germany.
GEMA.
Yeah, the GEMA law. But
give me a hard time, man.
But it's done for a good reason. The idea behind it is that it's trying to protect the actual the artist from getting ripped off. They actually get money from the videos that are watched online because of this law, because they go to the original site where they will earn the most money doing this. But that basically goes to show that you can censor. That it's a really hard proof that you can censor certain websites or certain things from the public based on either it can be based on laws, like in the case of GEMA, or it can be based on other things which we may not necessarily know because it's censored. It's not. There's certain things that you can't see. I've heard rumors that it's one of the things that like internet is heavily censored in China, but I don't know that. I've never been. But that sensory of information because of where your nationality is from is also an interesting concept. But it's basically limiting your raw data.
So yeah, speaking of censorship, I think one thing that the internet has really done for, I'd say, mostly the developing world is to overcome the censorship that had been done in the past by limiting what can be printed in textbooks.
Yeah.
Because for me as a Kenyan, I'd say I've multiple existences. not involving reincarnation, but multiple.
We're not going for the biblical stuff right now, right?
No, multiple existences in that. I'm a Kenyan, first of all, nationality-wise. Then, my ethnicity is Luo, same as Obama's.
Oh, really?
Or Obama's dad, yeah. So that's my ethnicity. Then there's the fact that I grew up in Nairobi. It's metropolitan. And the most information I got about who I am or where I came from was in textbooks, like the Luo community, but it was very limited. It was these people come from, they mostly stay in this part of the country. Their main economic activity is fishing and
becoming the U.S. president.
Yeah, we celebrate that a lot right now. And there's like stuff about the initiation of boys and whatnot. But that was just very basic. But after with the internet I can get to find out more about my people, like
Yeah.
where they came from, where we are right now, and there's some intercommunity rivalry. Like in Kenya, the biggest rivalry between tribes is the Luo and there's a tribe called the Kikuyu.
Okay.
With one side they're saying that these people are always spoilers, the Luos are always spoilers, and the Luos mostly say the Kikuyus as people who don't want the Luos to touch power at all.
Mm.
And there's large numbers of people who take this rivalry as something they take it personally.
Mm.
They got it from informal education, from hearing it from their parents, telling them these people are bad, these people are bad. So sometimes you end up hating somebody because you're taught to hate them, but
Yeah.
But and the sources of such rivalries, you'll never find them in textbooks.
Right.
But
they're reinforced by textbooks.
They're reinforced by textbooks in a way, because textbooks will either be completely silent about it, or like as a kid for a long time I thought that only the people who fought for freedom, fought against colonialism, were the Kikuyu.
Mm-hmm.
That's most of the people who are mentioned in that struggle. History books are from that community, at least at primary school level.
Right.
And that was way back. I don't know if they changed it, but much later there's guys who have access to information from different places, and they keep sharing them online. They share archives, they share letters that have been found between different political leaders from the past, and the origins of such power struggles. I get to find out more about them, and I get to have a better understanding of how things work, and I get to look at it more objectively. So, but it's a challenge because it's not informal education.
Right.
If it were informal education, it would have I would have grown up knowing these two communities are rivals, but the rivalry originated here and here.
Yeah.
And since so that way someone might have a better understanding of it and somewhat of a better attitude towards it, as opposed to now when you got it in the textbook and you had it informally.
Right.
Without the addition of the internet, which will overload you with information,
right? Yeah,
you might not have the chance to find out more.
Right. So here's a good analogy. Yeah. Have you ever heard culture described like a goldfish in a bowl?
Enlighten me.
Okay, so the idea is that a goldfish is it's in the water, right? Or it's a fish in water. Goldfish in a bowl, either one.
Yeah.
But basically the idea is that a fish lives in water. And that's it, and it's surrounded by water, and it breathes in water as part of its breathing cycle. And that's what it knows. And that's for them that's culture. So they're surrounded by it, they breathe it, they live it. But they don't necessarily it's just is.
That's just it. There's no beyond the bowl. That's just their existence, and that's just their existence, and
that's it. And then when they leap out of water, like the flying fish, who are just crazy, then that's another area. It's like, oh look, I'm out of the water. What can I understand about water from up here, right? It's those different lenses almost, and I think in many respects education also depends on the lens in which you structure the information, because that lens effectively shows you how you learn certain things. I mean, a perfect example of this is I know you took the class Culture and Globalization here at BTU,
right?
I
took it.
I didn't, because everybody thought I did.
Yeah.
I still don't. I would have liked to take the class. I did not take the class.
If you had a coma and woke up, you'd have signed up for the exam.
Yeah, probably. I should probably check that anyway.
Yeah.
But apparently, what you guys did in that class was basically analyze how a lot of the ideas on culture and a lot of the theories and basically what heritage is all about really comes from this European education standpoint. It's how people are educated and how you're supposed to preserve the past, right? And so you critically look at that and you say, well, here what's the problems here? Like the term third world, right? The term third world apparently is is an invention of the Cold War,
True.
right? I don't know. You took the class.
I know that before the term came up, we just knew that we were in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Then at some point, the word third world started getting a lot of attention, and it was mostly used within the context of power play.
Right. It's immediately a degrading term.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, from what I understand, third world is basically, it was differentiating between the two powers at the time during the Cold War, which was the United States and Russia. And one was the first world, one was the second world, and then everybody else who wasn't associated with those powers were the third worlds. And most of them, because of circumstances, ended up being the recently decolonized countries of the world. So pretty much the entirety of Africa, India, and those, of course, are the big two places in terms of landmass size. But there are plenty of other places I mean, basically the entire Middle East as well. And that's where all the proxy wars were fought anyway, in Middle East and in all these different locations. And that's where using the term third world, you need to understand where it comes from before you actually use it, especially since it has it's such a negative thing, right? Because it's not like it immediately implies that your country is a developing country. And what does that mean, right?
You're poor.
Yeah. and which, like, okay, you're poor, but that doesn't mean that you're a lower class citizen, are you?
Technically, it means fewer people want you in their country. There's this thing called the ranking of passports, and most countries in the third world have really weak passports.
Yeah.
Then we have other people like, say, the Germans, who can go almost everywhere visa-free.
Right.
So there's still a bit of that power play in a more polite sense.
Yeah, of course.
Another question. Which aspect of technology or which gadget or which tech thingy do you think has inspired you the most? And how do you think your life would be without it?
Inspired me the most?
Inspired you the most, moved you the most, distracted you the most?
Yeah, distracted, I mean, is obviously my computer. But that's because actually this will be a nice segue. And actually both a segue and a stopping point, because then we'll split to the second half. My biggest distraction in all times, because I love stories and I like a good narrative, is good games. I have a lot of games. It's probably my only vice in this world. That and like what's the food? It's like a you probably never, maybe you've had this, I don't know, but it's like a corn pancake of sorts. You know what? I'll make it for you sometime and it'll be fantastic. But anyway, like corn pancakes and good games, right? Oh no, raspberries. Raspberries are actually really good. Hint hint, July 1st, my birthday, you know? Yeah. All right. But really well built games are something that I really enjoy, because a lot of the games that I do end up playing are story driven and narrative driven. And what they aim to do is they aim to basically convey a story through basically the system that is the game itself. It's a systems. It's a way of explaining something to the actual player. I think, and I mean, there's some games that are just purely for entertainment and for socializing, but there are some which I really do think have an excellent story to it and really bring to light some issues and some problems in the world. I mean, an excellent example of this would be I recently played Metal Gear Solid 5. You know, of course, there's plenty of different issues and problems with the game, both in the sense of just like the political correctness, all this jazz. But what it aims to do is it aims to show a time period. It tries to dramatize a time period in the 80s where there was a lot of private forces in both Afghanistan and Africa, and does through the eyes of Solid Snake or Venom Snake. I forget what the main character was, and it does it, and it portrays that story in such a way that you're able to then you go through the actions that you have to of the character. You played the role of the character that has to make these hard decisions, and through the narrative of the story, it makes you understand certain things about what was going through that person's mind, or maybe what was going through that time period. Of course, a lot of it's fiction. There's things like other games of Star Wars and other games of different other things. But some of the best games that I've played usually have some sort of story behind it that makes it compelling and doesn't necessarily try to teach you something, but you get something out of it about what you believe in, what you think is important. And that leads, and I think we'll probably cut it here for the second half, is storytelling as a way of communicating those values, those important values that are sometimes seen in heritage, or in the classroom, right? So let's take a little break, and then we'll be back with part 2.
Thanks for listening.